And welcome back to The Breakaway with David and Fabian. We have a very special guest on, one of our favorites, Nic Tartaglia from Imperium Mind. What's up, Nick?
What's up, gentlemen?
Or as David
Uh,
likes to say,
From the newly liberated and soon to be great state of Canada.
there we go.
From the 51st state.
Welcome, Nick. Welcome in so many
Absolutely.
ways.
Always a pleasure to come and talk with you guys. Stuff is getting chaotic, and now that it's perfect timing too, because now that America is kind of trying to bring in Canada into the mix, here our collaboration between Americans and Canadians.
Nick, I wanted to ask you because we're kind of laughing at this, to be honest, Canadians at the 51st state, but it's pretty crazy that Trump is literally talking about this before he's even president, and Canadians are like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Like,
Yep.
are people really responding like this? And why has no one ever
Yes.
suggested it before?
I think it's a division type thing within the conservative side, or at least the people that would more go lean conservative. It's definitely a conversation that people are having in a positive light, or they're more intrigued about how this go about. If you tell every Canadian you're gonna convert my Canadian dollars into American dollars for one, that's an automatic gain for Canadian wealth. Like
Oh, wow.
it's an advantage for me, right? Because I'm already at a disadvantage. For for a dollar Canadian, it's like 60 cents American. But if you give me a one-for-one conversion from a wealth standpoint, you have a lot to gain as a Canadian.
Wow.
So that's definitely a huge advantage. And secondly, the thing is the Canadian culture is so docile and monotone that we need a little bit of that American revolutionary energy to come back to kind of wake us up. And we have so much land to offer. We have so much resources to offer that I think it's to an advantage for both this country. They're both countries to kind of see a future of synergy rather than kind of being divided because like what's the advantage to not work together as two countries that are bordering where there's so much land, so much resources, and this combination of Canada and America together would definitely put kind of a hindering on the Eastern blocs, which have a lot of dominion and control over natural resources.
Yeah.
So by America working and finding a way to really collaborate more effectively with Canada, I think it's to the advantage of all of the Western countries because there's so much land and resources here to tap into. And Canada is so government intervening and so in the way of the mining and oil and gas industries that we just can't tap into it very well. But if we bring in some of that more conservative energy to come into Canada and open up the floodgates of resources, there's so much wealth to be made here.
And Nick, how many people are in Canada? Is something like what
41 million people.
41 million in wow, that's incredible because that's about
That's the
the
whole
size of
landmass.
I
California.
was just about to say
It's
it's the
the
second
second,
count.
yeah, correct. And we're the second largest landmass in the world after Russia, with so much like potentially the most or one of the most resource abundant lands in the country. So in
Wow.
the world, sorry. So it's like this is just an advantage that America take advantage of. It'll remove the whole game that we're playing with Eastern blocks where we have to be delicate because we don't want to get burnt with commodities and resources because they produce most of it. So if
Hmm.
you have your neighbor producing most of it for you, it brings in lower cost. You have all the labor you need here. I think it's a win-win for everybody if this kind of, or at least this dialogue continues. It was one of my dreams. I always said that whoever would make this happen would make a name and a legacy of themselves because
Wow.
it would kind of it brings new spirit and new want for the future of the West. Enough with the European games, the European EU, the conflict, the war over there. Let's look at Canada and America, which is two massive landmass together. I think it would be an incredible tale for history to see someone was able to actually bring these two countries together in a very effective way, where their synergy was the primary pillar of this, rather than fighting over a simple little border. Honestly, just remove that border, let people flow between the two countries. I think that would be a huge benefit for both countries.
Yeah, I mean, I love Canada. I've been there probably six times, seven times now. I was there when they were shutting down the border during COVID. I almost stood there because I loved it so much, but I didn't know when they were going to reopen it. So I ended up going home on the day they shut it down. And it's just sad what's been happening to it. But it would be interesting to see if Pierre, and I always butcher his last name,
Yeah,
Poilievre,
Pouliot. Yeah, Pouliot.
Poilievre, Pierre
It's French.
Poilievre,
Yeah,
Pierre
exactly.
Poilievre,
Yep. Oh yeah.
and Donald Trump would go on the campaign trail or do some kind of tour together where they appear and talk about how this could work, with him being what would be essentially a governor of Canada at that
Yeah.
point. It'd be interesting.
Governor of the 51st state.
Honestly, I think it should be decimated, not even him be the governor anymore. Just you see, that's the thing. I think it also threatens his position from a political standpoint because if that synergy does happen and we go back to like, Quebec is its own state, Ontario is its own state, then Pierre Poilievre technically has no more relevance anymore on the
Mm.
on a federal play. Like from a federal standpoint, he has no more relevance to the game. So from his standpoint, from his own interest, I don't know if there would be because it kind of removes all his effort and work. So there's a little more self-interest there from a political standpoint for him. Because I know he has given a little bit of clash back. Not necessarily saying he wants it, but he does want to work with Trump. But I don't think he wants Trump to really annex or make Canada the 51st state because he did make a post on LinkedIn about it. But I think that's just more because of the fact that again, it puts his whole political career in jeopardy, and he's been working for this now this whole time.
Well, I think that'd be interesting because he is now going to be the head of parliament. So if obviously we don't use a parliamentary system in America, so that would cause an entire change of the executive judiciary branch. You'd have to go to American style, and then yeah, he would be left running for a position at that point. And did you say that it would be divided into regions like
Yeah,
British?
exactly. The same way, like Quebec would be its own province. So we have 11 or 12 provinces in total, but each one will be individually called a state. And then you would have your own governor of each state. So
So
there
you'd
would
have
Oh,
like
so
be
we
what?
we
a
wouldn't have
federal
just a
elected
51st state.
person.
Yeah, there's what, 5 provinces in Canada?
There's no, there's like 11 or 12 with the
Okay.
northern, with the Yukon and the yellow and all that stuff up there.
Yeah. Okay. Because
We'll just combine the like Democrat leaning ones into one, so we just afford them a low amount of electoral college
yeah,
points, and
yeah.
then separate
You
the.
just have to give them the East Coast, the West Coast.
There we go.
But Nick, aren't there like five big ones, and then all the other
Yes,
ones
correct.
they're
There are
tiny,
the
tiny,
primary
right?
ones: Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, and Vancouver and BC. Those are the primary
Yeah,
four.
yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
They make
So
up most of
then,
the population. Most of the economic output is all primarily there.
yeah, and then the other ones are wherever the Trailer Park Boys come from.
Yeah, it's all in the center. But the thing is, there's so much land. And the thing is, by opening this up, my God, I think it would just be like just a revolutionary moment in Western history to see two major countries that really founded the West come together and show like, you know what, enough with this conflict, this fighting. Let's come together and let's focus on the future. Let's focus on actual economic development from a fundamental standpoint. Enough with the political games. Let's just do things the right way because we want to work together. I see no disadvantage by working with my fellow Americans. To me, as a Canadian, I see nothing but a benefit. So I don't see why this should not become a political or a negative political game. This should be, okay, but let's talk about the positives, talk about how we can actually benefit. Like how can everybody benefit?
Yeah. I'm really interested in this whole narrative that's been talked about where Russia's saying their warships above and China, I guess for that matter, above Canada and around Canada and
Oh
all the
yeah.
things happening with that and the influence coming from China and obviously people like Klaus Schwab and the WEF. It would be such a detrimental blow to the globalists to have something like this happen. Not even speaking about Russia and China and the resources and the Bering Strait over there. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much that can be gained for sovereignty for Canada from those other players and as well as for just like national defense.
Yeah. I like how this
Correct.
all started though in the first place. It was like a joke, right? I think Trump made that joke in his first
Hmm.
administration to take Canada, right? But this all started because he said, I'm going to impose 25% tariffs on everything that we import from Canada unless they start to help us with illegal immigration. So then, when he was the prime minister, I guess he still is, flew down to Mar-a-Lago,
Yep.
had that meeting with Trump, and that's when it all
Yeah.
started, right? He was like, you'll make a great governor. You guys will make a great 51st state. And now it led us to a place, at least I've seen, that part of the reason Trudeau is stepping down is because he just doesn't want to deal with Trump. And it's great. It all happened in a matter of 2-3 weeks. It all happened because we threatened tariffs on them.
Also, like Christina Freeland resigned as well.
Who's
He had
that?
resigned a couple
Inform
weeks
me.
right before the
Who's
disastrous.
that?
But the thing is, from an international standpoint, Christian Flynn, she's the former minister of finance for Canada.
That
She was a
first started.
journalist
That's right. Yep.
who knows absolutely nothing about nothing. put in a position, and I guarantee you she's put in that position purely because of DEI nonsense. She's a woman, not because she's actually competent or credible.
Yep.
She has no idea what she was talking about. And she backed down, Trudeau backed down. And honestly, on an international level, Canadian politics, I talk to a lot of macro guys from around the world, from Europe, America, Canada. The Liberal Party, the Canadian politics, we become a complete laughing stock on the
Yeah.
world international stage. It's a joke. Nobody respects us anymore on this stuff. It's just a complete joke. And Trudeau, I think, has finally been feeling the pressure internally from his party to be just back off because he's got nothing positive anymore. It's just the only way for him to evade these issues is by not talking about it. That's pretty much all he's been doing, just not talk about it.
Yeah. Which makes him more evasive. And we know what happened with Karen Bass evaded the questions yesterday on the airplane. It looked terrible
Yep.
when she was confronted and she just sat there, not even saying any
Right.
words like that. And I've said this before, clip it. That's going to be the downfall to her. Any re-election that she wants to have is that moment, what she's doing right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
I know exactly. Saw the video. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask you. So, just like in Russia, the issue with Canada is that it's a big landmass, right? But majority of it you can't actually tap into.
No, we can't. It's
At
too
least
political.
that too political. Okay, so
Too
that's
much.
that's that.
It's like the Democrats. It's like when it comes to oil, they're too impeding. It takes a decade to build out a mine in North America. There's too much government in the way. It's just forever. So the issue is the Eastern blocks. When they want to build a mine, they build it right away. They go
Yeah.
aggressive. When the West wants to build a mine, there's a whole decade-long process of getting this and that form and this survey and that survey. This is government approval, that government, and on average, it takes almost a decade here to build a mine. So it's to the advantage of the Eastern blocks because as demand grows, who's the ones that could automatically supply all the growing demand? It's the Eastern bloc, not the West, because we want all this stuff, but we don't want to go in our own backyard to get it because we created this massive barrier to entry. So the Eastern blocks who don't have that barrier can supply right away.
So in a sense, it's pretty much similar to what we have here in America, is that there's like shared grievances, I would say, between Americans and Canadians that they don't feel like their politicians are putting their country or their
No,
interests first,
correct.
which why I think it would probably be a successful referendum if there was ever one in Canada. Is like, hey, do you guys want to join America, especially under leadership like Trump's, because they see, okay, America can actually get out of this ideology of where they are put last. They can actually be put first. It just depends
Correct.
on a good, good leadership,
Well,
essentially.
and it's also, I mean, Europe is watching. Europe is in a terrible, terrible position. I'd say the worst out of
Yeah,
America, Canada, and Europe. They are in the worst position, and they are so social there, or so not. They have
Like socially
socialistic,
liberal.
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
socially
yeah,
liberal,
yeah.
and their policies and politicians. This would be a massive blow to all of Klaus Schwab's little young world leaders or whatever he calls them, his little puppet minions, which one of them which is Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern, who's gone, thankfully. All these people, this would be a massive blow to that whole organization,
Yeah.
and one for more freedom.
correct. But that's it. It abides more by the foundational principles of freedom and free trade and the freedom of movement.
Yeah,
We share a freaking landmass. Why are we so restrictive between each other? It's easier to be an illegal immigrant in America than it is to be a Canadian trying to come into America.
Hmm.
Like we're one of the most educated population. I'm going to put a quotation educated from a school standpoint in the world
yeah,
is Canada. And
yeah.
yet for us to enter America, to come and work and become a citizen of America is such a
It
complicated
really is
route.
hard. Yeah, yeah.
The
I've
joke
got
here is
friends.
literally, well, I may as well just go down to Mexico and run through the border and I'll be an American citizen faster than I'm from being a Canadian one.
It's crazy. No, I mean, and if we're looking for the best and brightest minds, why not integrate Canada and get those minds working for U.S. companies easily without having to go through all this visa process?
Right. You
And
won't
then
even
you
have
can
to
limit the
move.
amount of H-1 visas that we need. So that kills that conversation. Everyone's happy. Now we have, a whole set of brothers up to the north. What do we call Canada? We call it what? Like I call it our polite cousins to the north. It's like that
No.
cousin at dinner that has more like etiquette than like the other cousins, and you're like, I like those guys.
But they
It's,
share
it's
they
more,
share the
it's
exact
like a
same
clique.
opinion, and they're like, just one is
Mhm.
willing to say, the other one's like,
Yeah,
let me be a little polite
yeah,
about this
No, no,
situation.
yeah,
no. I think it would be it's a legacy move. If Trump can make this happen, to him, this is a legacy move that you could be remembered for
yeah.
But
because
is
this
this
is
all gonna
different.
just Sorry, Dick. I was gonna
No,
say,
go, go, go.
will this allow other nations like Russia to start to justify taking over other regions? I mean, we would do this,
which they're kind of doing already.
which they're doing already, right?
But it's from this would be more from a collaborative standpoint. Like you're not America can't necessarily force us into this. I don't see that going down right. The good like from if we could play this more from a coercion or from a manipulation standpoint, I don't think it'll go well. I think if anything, it'll create more
Yeah,
uh, resistance, especially for
Definitely.
people like me. If you go this from a voluntary standpoint, let the momentum internally in Canada drive us and running to you and pull you in
yeah,
because
Which
there's people here that want it.
I don't know if you guys saw, but Trump was asked in a press conference. I think it was, yeah, yesterday. What about Greenland? And he said, well, when it
Right.
comes down to Greenland, we can, impose our economical power, but
yeah.
then we can
Denmark.
also impose military. And I was like, okay, that's a little,
But
Yeah,
it's kind of
well,
like what China is doing with Taiwan. It would be kind of similar move as that, where you kind of hold a lot of military power around the landmass while the Eastern Bloc is pretty far away, kind of like China's doing with Taiwan, circulating it. But even though Taiwan is supposed to be part of the mainland, but is actually working alongside. So
yeah,
this is where Trump has to be careful with his language because he doesn't want to come about looking like he's trying to play this political power hungry game through might and force. If he takes an intellectual route to this, he has the means to do it because the reasoning is there, the logic is there. I don't think taking that coercive route is the smart play. I think it's just take an intellectual route to this pursuit, and it makes sense.
yeah. You know, it's interesting. I feel like we're shaping up for another East versus West thing in the next 20, 30, 50 years,
yeah.
like we
It
had in the
is
Cold
absolutely.
War. You know, because if America gets Canada and they're, we're building, or who knows when they're going to start breaking ground on them, everything that was started from the CHIPS Act, all these plants and NVIDIA and Intel want to build here. We build our own chips. We don't need Taiwan semiconductor anymore. And we don't need to
Commodities that go
expend
into it.
all the commodities, and we don't have to expend so much naval power protecting Taiwan, et
Correct.
cetera. China knows eventually they're going to get it with enough pressure.
Definitely.
They can literally build islands so they don't have to attack on boats and things like that. So I see this as a long-term play. Okay, let's secure more of the West, and then China can take over Taiwan. We'll move shipping over, or we're here. We'll move chip manufacturing over
Yeah.
here,
Which
and then
is
it's
cheaper, right? I mean, we don't have
Correct.
I mean, what is it? Take that entire journey from Taiwan via cargo
The
ship
shipping
to the United
process.
States. Yeah, exactly.
But that's
And
why
I
if
was
the
gonna
whole supply
say,
chain is here, it's perfect.
yeah,
I was also gonna add, you were talking about the H-1B visas. We know there's a big Indian population in Canada, so there
yeah,
you go.
yeah, yeah.
we get everything that we need.
Yeah. Now I could see the
The big
Democrats.
tech, bro. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I could see Democrats saying, well, if you're going to give up Canadians American citizenship, then you need to give illegals here American citizenship. I could see that as an argument that they start to bring to the
Correct.
table,
Sure. Absolutely. Fair enough.
you know. But restart the Keystone pipeline, and you could share revenue on that differently if it's one big, one country. I mean, there's so many things that you can do.
And we can
Um,
benefit from the fact that, again, if we're one nation instead of two nations trading each other, when it comes down to these necessities of resources, like the fact that
Correct.
90% of the natural gas in America comes from there, beneficial for both sides, probably.
yeah, yeah,
Uranium. You
absolutely.
guys are in America's trying to expand on uranium now. Like Canada is one of the biggest producers of uranium in the world, and there's so much
Wow.
untapped natural resources from gold to silver to nickel to phosphate to potash to you name it, we have it. It's a massive fucking landmass.
Yeah.
Why are we playing this game? Because then you get it like you were saying, right? Then you get the chip manufacturing, the whole supply chain. You have it in your backyard.
Yep.
But because we try
Yep.
to regulate and over impede ourselves on everything, it's all been shipped outside because it's just easier to do it elsewhere. And then we have to bring it back here. And think about that means less oil demand. From a green standpoint, it's better to have everything in our backyard because you require less shipping and
Yep.
less that whole shipping journey is eliminated after.
Yep.
Think about it
Absolutely.
from also the Greenland perspective, is that if it becomes, Canada and Greenland, well, Greenland is actually a strategic, both in terms of trading, but also enforcing our power onto the Eastern Bloc, because in general, you take over Greenland, that's going to start to apply a lot of pressure on Russia.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely. And it's a staging ground where you can intercept anything
mhm,
much quicker. You can put bases there. And I know how you do this. It's very easy to take over Greenland. Denmark has annexed it. All you do if you're Trump and you say, Ozempic comes from from Denmark, you say, look, we're going to ban Ozempic from the US. You're not going to make her hundreds of billions of dollars. unless they give us Greenland. That's a fair trade.
It is.
In my eyes, that's a fair trade.
They acquired it for back in the day for $50 million, which counting to inflation and everything like that, now it's $100 billion. We can do that. We can afford that.
Yeah.
No problem.
I mean, we sent 250 to 250 billion to Ukraine, so why not 100 billion to acquire a massive piece of land?
There you go. There you go. I think it can get done.
Yeah. But
And
that,
what
yeah,
I say too is going back to the Taiwan thing, right? Think about this. Back in the day when Hong Kong became separate from England, nobody fought to keep Hong Kong part of the West. China took it over right away. There was no resistance. And this was during Trump's time. And I get it. Trump's not going to go play the political warfare trying to dominate every country. Like, it's not the battle to win. You're not going to go causing international conflict over these little things. Taiwan, it's their problem to figure it out with China. America is going to subdivide itself into too many fractional conflicts that it's just going to be easy to take it by surprise and do what it wants to America after because it's so divided between all these regional conflicts. America needs to choose what matters and what doesn't matter. And China taking over Taiwan is not an important thing. America is too divided. And now with the naval force of China being greater than that of America's, and its output of future naval production is still greater than America's too.
yeah.
It's not the time for trying to play this naval warfare. We're trying to be in the Red Sea in the Middle East, and then you're in Europe, and then you're in Africa, and then you're in the South Sea China. Like, it's not to the advantage of America. You're going to get too subdivided.
Yeah, especially we as you said, their output and ship creation is greater than we have right now. In addition to that, only a fraction of all of our ships in the Navy are available at any point in time. And it's not like we have 100% of our Navy. Most of those, and I've read reports, something for anywhere from 10 to 33% are available at any given time. But that's just for Navy in general. There's tons of things, and for the Air Force as well, repairs, all these things that have to happen. So it's not like we have our entire Navy ready at any point. We have a fraction of it. And if China's building these cheaper, but a lot more vessels than we can, then they can be doing recon in so many more places than we can, whether it be with submarine or with a Corvette or a cruiser, any type of naval ship that we just can't match. And we know why they do it so much quicker than us, because they have to. They have slave labor. But
And they
yeah,
also have all the commodities. Don't forget that. It's all the input,
absolutely.
all the metals you need for military weapons and all the stuff in the ships. Most of the input metals do not come from the West. They come from Eastern Bloc nations. That still proves a lot of countries that sanction Russia, like Canada sanction Russia, but they'll still not apply those sanctions to certain commodities because they need it.
They need it.
Because
Depending
Russia
on the
produces it. It's one of the only ones that produce it. Same thing with China. So there's this whole, it's, well, we'll sanction you, but what we need from you, we won't sanction you. And
Yeah.
this is what the duality is. If all these things are produced here in the West, from a military standpoint, you're less dependent on the East. You can produce things faster, less supply chain barriers. Everything's in your backyard. From a military
Yeah.
standpoint, from an economic growth standpoint, backyard play, Canada being a part of America, I think is such an advantage.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is just what we know on the surface. We don't know what we're not being told as far as Chinese influence in Canada. We know that they're building
Right.
influence all over South America, Central America, El Salvador especially, the Panama Canal issue,
Africa now.
Africa, where they're exporting all of
Again,
their
natural
biometric
resources.
Yeah,
natural resources, because they have their digital yuan and they can give loans to any country they want at a push of a button without all the regulation and bureaucracy and red tape that we have to go through, and get money there quickly. And they're getting influence over here. So I think the Trump administration was like, look, let's just nip it in the bud and take over or absorb them into America. And now good luck, China getting in. It's going to be a lot harder than what they've been doing for now.
I think
People
that's a big
go.
problem that we have actually is I'm not so worried about China taking over Taiwan. I'm just worried about building nations in South America and in Africa, something that we failed to do. I mean, we threw trillions probably at the issue in Africa and we didn't do anything. What is China doing? Taking that same exact money, but actually building their infrastructure. Why? So they can actually trade with China. And this is where things get a little scary because if China can replace the demand that Europe and especially us as America bring to them by just replacing us with South America and Africa, then they can actually wage war against us, right?
Yeah.
The only reason why China doesn't want to wage war against the West is because of how much they depend on us. But what if you remove that dependence, replace it with South America and Africa? Then
Here's something that we couldn't ever offer Africa that China can offer Africa, and that's security. But that's security in the form of no liberties. That's security in the form of 15-minute cities, biometric cameras everywhere, and their algorithms that could pick anything up. We didn't offer that to Africa. We offered aid, support, helping to build infrastructure. But China can come in and say, look, we made this place safe. America, you can never have done that. But as a result of that, people in Africa lose all of their liberties and are put into the Chinese algorithms, which is what we've been fighting so hard to stay off of.
But they also, America tries to force democratic regimes or
Correct.
democratic, I guess, way of government and life
Niger is a perfect
in these
example.
countries. There you go. Yeah. In
Niger is the
areas
perfect
that
example.
absolutely will never have a democracy. So they spend so much time trying to essentially make America 2.0 there. Whereas you're right, China isn't so worried about making sure that they have their liberal, civil rights and all that
No.
stuff. They just care about, can you guys trade? Can
Yeah.
I park my boat here and load it and then bring it back to my country?
And what they want are strong leaders in Africa. They don't care if they have if they're authoritarian, because that's actually better than for China, because then they get to have a guy in there for 40 years who no one gets out of power, who makes sure that China gets what they want, and they get what they want in the form of getting
a puppet
rich.
regime. Look at in Afghanistan is also a great example of that, of America trying to make it a democracy. But these are tribes that have been having conflicts with each other for decades. You're never going to have democracy there. So we spent so much money on trying to make that, and we failed. Same exact thing that happened in Africa. And it looks like we're about to drop the ball with South America as well,
Yeah.
Latin America, and all that stuff.
That's the
Yeah.
thing. America's foreign policies have been a little sad. It's like enough. You guys have blown way too much money on foreign conflict. And going back to the Roman Empire, what was one of the pillars that tore them down at the end? They went around the world causing so much conflict that people were migrating to the Roman Empire, but people that didn't have any resemblance to the culture, didn't care for the culture, didn't respect the fundamental principles of the Roman Empire. And that was one of the pillars that helped bring about chaos and disruption internally in America. And you're seeing that happening now to America. America's going around and trying to cause too much problems everywhere else. It's good that Trump wants to say, enough with that. Let's come back to our roots. Let's focus on our problems at home. Make your own bed before you try to tell someone how to do their own bed.
Yeah, and he will actually take the best position possible, because he doesn't take an interventionist position. Obviously, we just talked about it, but he doesn't take a full isolationist position either. He understands that there are conflicts around the world, there are global issues that need America to actually address them and to be quote unquote intervening in them, but not fully like these globalists or neocons or neolibs, whatever it is,
Yep.
but not to the point of where it's like a Tucker Carlson style isolationist of like, oh, we're America, we're so far apart. I like it. It's a great mix, basically.
Yeah.
It's what we need right
It's
now.
a good hybrid. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, Nick, next time we talk, we may be brothers in arms, so to speak. And yeah, that would be cool, because I would love to be able to go into Canada without any restrictions. And I'm sure the same Canadians would love to come to America without restrictions. It'd be great.
Oh, 100%. There's again, that's a legacy move, I think. That you go down in history as definitely making a crazy positive move that history will remember for you for, and there's nothing negative that can come of it. It's just saying we're going to collaborate, remove barriers, let the people between these two nations just do what they're meant to do. Innovate, collaborate, work together, and improve this world.
Yeah. I mean, it seems, interesting how quickly, I know we have to wrap up, how Canada was even formed, in the Revolutionary War, and then France. And it's such an incredible story how we ended up being divided. And now we can come full circle and actually complete the landmass for once, which is, really cool, to be honest.
But we may have to
Absolutely.
slap an extra 1% tax on all Canadians that would become Americans, just because you guys burned down our White House in 1812 or something like that.
Reparations. Huh?
We need reparations, maybe.
That's funny. Well, Nick, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's always such a
course.
pleasure speaking with you. Can you tell people how to find you?
Yeah, of course. So you guys can find me now on Substack. You can find my Imperium Mind, or just type in Nic Tartaglia, no K. And then there's a new YouTube channel coming out, Imperium Mind, but it hasn't really been launched officially, but it's there. And then you can find me on Instagram at Nic Tartaglia, and on Twitter at Imperium Mind.
For everyone watching, thank you for sticking around this long. Make sure that you follow myself and David and Breakaway USA, and we will see you next time.